All right. Well, we just finished riding the Copper Canyon. What did you think?
It's pretty darn amazing. Pretty darn amazing, but pretty technical for some of it too. Yeah.
So the first leg we did was out of the town of Alamos to Chinipas de Almada. That was 113 kilometers. And pretty quickly after we got out of Alamos, we lost the pavement. We ended up in a combination of dirt and gravel for the most part. How did you find that?
The dirt and gravel wasn't too bad actually, and I lulled myself into believing that that's what it would be like for the next 110 kilometers or something, because it was manageable. It was, wide enough that cars could pass each other easily and whatnot.
There wasn't that much traffic though.
No.
No, every once in a while we had some traffic, and along the route there were some industry, a little bit, but the road was pretty much vacant. There was one section, I don't know if you remember, where it was a pretty steep climb. It was fairly rocky, fairly rough, probably about one of the roughest sections we hit. And we were climbing pretty steady, pushing the bikes, and we actually overheated the motorcycles.
I was surprised. Michael, at some point, we came around a corner, and so we're climbing up into the mountains, came around a corner. Michael's like, I'm going to stop. And I think it was more like we were just going to stretch our legs a little bit. But then he says, my bike's overheating. And I hadn't even thought to look down at my dash to see what it was doing. Mine was overheating as well. I was just so focused on staying safe on the road.
Yeah,
but,
now
we've been climbing for quite a while.
Yeah, it was a pretty hot day.
Yeah.
And it was pretty rough. We were standing and bouncing around. And so we stopped for several minutes, let the fans run.
Yeah.
And then turn the engines over to cycle the coolant, turn them off, let the fans run. About 5 minutes or so to cool the bikes down.
Yeah.
And then once we let the bikes cool down, we took off, and we just took it at a slightly more sedate pace.
Yeah, I was trying to go fairly quickly to power up some of the steep stuff, just because it's more comfortable than going slow. Sometimes just open it up and go. Yeah. Probably not so great for the bike sometimes, especially if you're in second gear.
Yeah, now it turns out it was probably, another 300 yards, and we were out of that steep section.
Yeah.
And it flattened out a bit. And the bikes would have cooled down anyway.
Yeah.
So, but it was, traction was decent. Like, it wasn't like the surface was loose. It was just very rough terrain.
It was rutted. It was rutted, like water had come through it, and it was rutted, and there were, lots of corners, and it was always climbing. So, you're navigating a lot of different elements as you climb. So.
And the other thing, though, that we found, especially in some of the switchback corners, which of course were all steep, was this. Man, it must have been 6 inches deep of this super fine, powdery dust.
Of sand crushed, like if you can crush sand, it's like what this stuff was. Was that the same day?
We had a little bit of that on that day.
It was pretty darn challenging.
It was slippery. It wasn't so much, the challenge was it was slippery and that it was in these corners. So we'd go into these corners and we would actually stop just to kind of evaluate, and while stopped, the tires would still slip on the surface.
Yeah.
It was really unnerving. So how did we solve this problem? How did we descend through this really super slippery stuff?
So when it was time to descend, I hadn't even thought about this. Michael learned the trick somewhere is to shut your motorcycle off, turn off the engine, leave it in first gear, and use your engine brake to slowly creep down. I had both feet out. There's no way I was keeping my feet on the pegs. So I had my feet out on the ground, if I could touch it, and just inch my way down, because every time the bike moved, the wheels actually literally slipped. It was as if you were on ice with a coating of 4 inches of snow on top of ice. I don't even know how to describe it.
So you basically just ease the clutch and use the clutch to control your speed with the engine off.
Yeah, the clutch is my brake.
Yeah. Now, fortunately, most of these sections are really quite short, but...
Yeah, but short was like, 30 meters or something, because you had to get into it, around it, and then out of it. And then before you know it, you're into the next switchback. It was exhausting.
It was really slippery.
Yeah.
Thankfully, a few miles back before we got into Chinipas, they had started paving. And so we had some beautiful, wonderful paved stretches, interspersed with dirt, but some wonderful paved stretches. And then coming into Chinipas, we were following this other motorcycle just at the very end, and he goes around to the southern end of town. We figured, well, we can see the town, we see the bike. He obviously knows where he's going, so we'll follow him. We followed him, and he gets to a river crossing. Now, the river crossing is about 80 meters across.
It's quite wide. It's not a creek. Yeah.
And we watched him go across. So the water at its deepest was about 6 inches. So I said, well, I guess we're doing a water crossing. And I went across, and it was a little bumpy, and it was a little bit slippery, but no real issues. I got to the other side.
Well, to me, I'm watching Michael. I haven't moved yet. And so he's my, what do you call yourself? He's my canary in the coal mine. For a lot of these things. So I'm watching him go, and I'm watching his back tire go back and forth, and I'm thinking, is like that algae? Like are there ruts in there? So I'm thinking there's rocks. So I'm looking at this going, okay, I don't feel confident, and if I go across and I dump the bike, what's the worst that can happen? Well, there's lots of crap that happens when you dump your bike in the water all the way and you can't save it. So I didn't do it. I said, I can't do it, come back.
So I came back. And then, well, we had to ride around the entire town because the one area that Google thought we could enter the town by, I couldn't find the road. It looked like another river crossing,
yeah,
but I couldn't find it. So we rode these, these derelict, seemingly abandoned, they're not, but like goat paths almost, around the town for another 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Till we entered from the north end.
Trying to find another way across. And there was quite a nice bridge if you could find it. So if you're out there and you're going to do this, be persistent. You can't always trust Google Maps. You can't always trust your Garmin.
And this is a good point. There was one intersection we got to, and it was pretty obvious. There was a sign saying, turn right, go this way to Twonie del Mare, which we did. And it's the only road to get to Twonie. But at one point in time, neither the Google Maps nor the Garmin had the road we were on.
Yeah.
And so if that's going to unnerve you, be aware.
You might have to stop and ask a local if you see one, or you might actually have to look for the really faded signs with the little arrow pointing this way.
But there's no other road, so it's not like you're going to get lost.
Well, there was a T-junction. You could go straight, or you could turn.
After that T-junction, there was a sign there.
There was only one way to go. This is true. This is true.
So anyway, we get into Twonie. We found a hotel. The next day we leave, and we do the leg from Twonie through Bahuichivo and down to Cerro Cahui, and that whole route was another 113 kilometers. And from Twonie del Mare to Bahuichivo was more of the same.
Yeah.
Although I think there was more of that fine powdery dust stuff.
There was. So instead of having to climb through the no, actually we had to.
Still descending.
We were still descending. Okay, because I remember we changed directions quite a few times as far as the elevations. We were in the mountains the whole time.
No, you're right. There was a couple sections for climbing.
We had to climb
and I
through
remember
the
because on one of those climbs, I lost traction and I dumped my bike in this 6-inch deep powdery dust.
And it's the times when you don't have the camera running, unfortunately. Because,
Man.
And then what about the time when...
It was on that same leg.
Yeah.
So we're coming up to a corner, and just as we're about to enter the corner, this big dump truck comes around, which is fine.
But the road is narrow.
And then this pickup truck is passing the dump truck on this blind corner. And he's right in front of me.
Passing on the inside, coming right at Michael. I'm watching this going, like, it happened pretty quick.
I got nowhere to go. I stop, I try to move over, I end up falling into the rocks. Pickup truck dude just swerves in front of the dump truck and takes off. And thankfully the dump truck guys all get out and help me pick up my bike.
It was a slow motion fall over, but he had his wheels up. Like it was a bit of a ditch on the side, so a little unnerving for the corners, because you always have to be aware of the corners. I always hug the inside. I'm always close. But in that case, you can't do anything. There's two vehicles coming on a corner.
So anyway, a few dings and scratches on the bike. I'm fine. You know, a little shook up. Life goes on. But once you get to Bahuichivo, after that, the roads are all paved. And in fact, we asked the guy at the Pemex at the Bahuichivo about the road down to Cerro Cahui, and he said, "Oh, it's bad." It was perfectly fine.
Compared to what we had just ridden through, it had some potholes and pavement. It was fine.
So we were able to
It was enjoyable.
Ride down to Cerro Cahui. It was about 16 kilometers south of Bahuichivo. And we were able to do 80, 90 kilometers an hour without an issue. Just watch out for a few small rough patches in the pavement, and we were fine. The next day we left Cerro Caui back up through Bauichivo and then on to Creel. And that was 116 kilometers for that day. All pavement. And
the views, if you have a chance to ride through the Copper Canyon, whatever route you take, there's a few routes, highly recommended. There's so many different environments that you ride through. Like we were riding through pine trees at some point, like way up in elevation, and you could smell the pine, and it was just it was wonderful. And there weren't a lot of river crossings, I guess because we were so high, but you could look down into these amazing gorges and see. Sometimes you see water, sometimes it'd be empty, but the vistas were just incredible.
And they got better day by day. Right? The first day they were nice. The second day they were better. After we left Creel, we went from Creel to Batopilas, and that was the best riding. You ride down for a ways, then you're turning off to the right. And from that turn off to the right, down, literally down. We left Creel. Now, it was like
what was
3
the elevation?
degrees.
Oh, yeah.
It was 3 degrees at night in Creel, 3 degrees Celsius.
It was so cold.
So it was about 20 degrees when we made that turn,
Yeah.
but halfway between Creel and Batopilas. And that last 65 kilometer stretch, we descended from 2,500 meters down to 550 meters. We went from 20 degrees Celsius to 35 degrees Celsius into Batopilas. And what was that road like?
That was an amazing road too. The switchbacks on it were pretty incredible. They were pretty tight turns, switchbacks coming down. And the fun thing is you'd have goats. You'd see one goat and think, okay, I can get around that one goat. You just come around the corner and the rest of the herd was right there.
We were dodging goats and donkeys and
rocks,
horses and cows.
There were slides that came, they can
the
only
road
maintain the road so well, but there would be sections where the 2-lane road would become one road because the side next to the wall surface was completely covered in debris, and you just have to share the road. Yeah.
So the road was okay, but we had to watch for the rocks. There was a ton of rocks on the road.
Yeah.
And then out of Batopilas, we went back up to that intersection, turned east, went through Guaychochi and on to Beleza. And that was, I think, another 146 kilometers at least to Guaychochi. And so that same road, ascending from 550 meters up to, I think that day we hit a high of 2,800 meters.
Yeah, I think I was almost noticing the elevation a little bit, like my nose is starting to feel dry. And
we actually had to stop and put on another layer.
I put on my down jacket for a while because it was that cold. I was just uncomfortable.
Yeah. So, but if you want to ride the Copper Canyon, the route we did was fantastic, but really that stretch between Creel and Batopilas for us, and then Batopilas at the Guaychochi, was easily the best riding, the best scenery, and frankly the roads were pretty decent.
And it was fine. It was safe. People talk about be careful in the Copper Canyon or whatever. I think you just need to be careful not to run into a goat. That's it.
Yeah, you avoid the goats and you'd be doing pretty good.
Yeah.
All right. So that's it for us for now. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.